So good morning, everybody, and thank you very much, Lise, for that introduction. We're here, this panel is about skills development in cities, powering the engines of economic growth. We all are challenged, I think, by economic development in cities. They are critical productivity hubs, there are social challenges, and there are challenges for young people and skills development in all of our major cities. So the focus this morning for this panel, I think, will be fourfold. It's looking firstly at policy and policy development, policy interaction for cities, and making sure that they become productive hubs for innovation in particular. The second is looking at institutions and education providers working with business and thinking about how we can encourage more cooperation and collaboration to meet economic goals. The third is around the voice of young people, I think, and looking at how do we make sure that we are capturing youth voice and youth needs as we're thinking about urban and rural economic development. And lastly, thinking about the crucial role of leadership, political leadership, civic leadership, business leadership, and educational leadership in making policy delivery happen and work on the ground. So that's the framing for the session this morning. Thank you all for remaining with us and being here. My panel is a distinguished panel that we will be asking for their thoughts on this morning. Firstly, I'm very pleased to say we have the Right Honourable Anne Milton MP, who's the UK Minister for Skills and Apprenticeships, who will be giving us her thoughts first. Then we have Manish Kumar, on my right, who's the Managing Director and CEO of the National Skill Development Corporation from India. On my left, we have Emma Meredith. She is the International Director of the Association of Colleges in the UK, who will give us a sense of institutional education provider perspective. And lastly, but not least at all, we have youth voice in terms of Rachel Chua, who is the representative for Asia from the WorldSkills Champion Trust, and she's based in Singapore. So, without any further ado, the Minister has a very busy schedule, and I'd like to invite the Minister to give us our thoughts just now.
Thank you very much, Neil, for your kind introduction. Excellencies, Ministers, and I have to say I think all our distinguished guests are out there competing today. I'm delighted to be part of the Global Skills Conference. It reminds us that the issues of education and skills are at the very heart of the worldwide marketplace that business operates in today. And as Minister of Skills in England, I want to make sure that my country thrives and prospers with the highly skilled individuals that our businesses need, to give them their competitive advantage in a fiercely changing global marketplace. Because for businesses in London and Birmingham, their competitors are not just in Manchester, they were in Moscow, Beijing, and Sydney. In fact, anywhere in the world. Skills are fundamental for the success of our vibrant cities. All our cities need to enlarge their skilled labour pools. Crucially, skills is one of the best predictors of economic performance because high-skilled businesses invest where they know they can, recruit the absolute best talent to help their organisations grow. And cities can offer businesses a greater choice of skilled workers by having a big share of skilled residents. As well as attracting young people to our top-performing colleges and universities, who then want to start their careers in the cities where they have studied. Because the opportunities are more evident in these key cities. And those cities with higher skilled workforces tend to have a higher average wages and higher productivity than other areas. And the resulting business competitiveness is pivotal to accelerating local economic growth. We need cities to ignite economic prosperity, and we need highly skilled people to ignite those cities. Outcomes, though, have varied across the country. In England, the recent picture has shown London and the South East region pulling away from the rest of the country. And in response, the government have introduced an industrial strategy. Tackling regional education and skills disparities is a critical component in this strategy's ambition to drive local growth. This will help to rebalance the economy on a geographical basis, as well as ensuring the best conditions for new emerging markets to succeed. And to have the most impact, we need to work in very close partnership with local employers, schools, colleges, and also local government. As well with the elected mayors in place where the cities of Manchester and Birmingham sit, let me give you some other examples. First, the opportunity areas. This is a £72 million programme to target our most intensive support at 12 key areas of the country that has suffered from educational underperformance. Places facing some of the biggest challenges for young people growing up. We are working both inside and outside schools, with local communities, with businesses, with advisory groups, and with high-profile employers such as EDF Energy and Rolls-Royce. Not just to raise educational attainment, but to raise the sights and broaden the horizons for all those young people through mentoring and work experience. Secondly, devolution. Across England, there is a growing voice for localism. Local people want greater influence over how their money is spent in their local area. Local areas want more power in areas such as skills, transport, and housing. Local areas tell us that they understand their own challenges and indeed the opportunities that exist there. Local areas want to intervene to solve their own skills problems. The government has supported these local calls for areas such as London, Greater Manchester and Greater Birmingham, and we are working in partnership on devolving some funding of skills. And we believe this will lead to greater innovation, as training colleges and organisations devise imaginative plans to overcome local skills obstacles. Local people know what works best locally. And third, I want to focus on technical education. Since 2010, with business, we have created more than 3.5 million apprenticeships. Real jobs, giving people transferable skills, experience of industry. An amazing alternative for young people than university, and it's also an opportunity. The chance to learn and to progress in almost every career possible. We are also introducing new technical qualifications. We call them T-levels. These are prestigious qualifications and rigorous and so valuable, providing the skills our high-flying businesses need. And in England, we have an apprenticeship levy for the largest companies, who can then use this investment by creating new apprenticeship opportunities. All those opportunities will train and grow new apprentices. This is another powerful tool for cities, as most big companies tend to be present in our larger cities. Another way of securing strong economic growth through skills. The UK's approach to cities has enabled us to develop proven expertise in designing, developing, and delivering world-class technical education and professional skills, based on employer needs at a local, regional, national, and international level. Through the new skills partnerships in the UK, this high-quality expertise is available to our friends, wherever you are in the world. Our cities can help your cities develop an employer-driven apprenticeship model, one that is fit for purpose and ready for tomorrow's generation. Connected to apprenticeships is a new initiative called City Hubs, and it's all about widening participation in apprenticeships. We need to get more young people from ethnic minority groups and more people from disadvantaged areas to harness the opportunities and progression in apprenticeships. Because the streets of every city are most certainly not paved with gold. Some people in our cities are missing out, and talent is latent across all communities and all our cities. We are running 5 pilots, working very closely with local employers, who will reach out to these groups and make sure that they can contribute to the prosperity of every city involved, at the same time enhancing their own career prospects. Apprenticeships can help social mobility and economic growth. Our cities are hugely important. Our businesses play a significant role in economic growth. Yet ultimately, it's the skills and education of people that provides the foundations for this to all work successfully and globally. Talent, ladies and gentlemen, knows no geography. Skills know no boundaries. And education is the force that drives prosperity. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Milton, for setting such a challenging framework. I know you have to leave now to get on with the rest of your busy schedule, but that, I think, has given us a great start to the discussion this morning. What I do need to do is set an expectation that this panel will, because things are running a little bit behind, this panel will be closing at 12:30 so that we're not delaying you from your lunch. So we have 30 minutes in which to get into the rest of the discussion, and that's a soft signal to the rest of the panel members to be concise in their comments. I think it's great, just to mention, by the way, that we are a gender-balanced panel this morning, and I think that's an important signal to set out that at WorldSkills we are an inclusive organisation and want to make sure that gender parity, as well as parity of esteem, comes through in all of the work that we do. Now, without any further ado, Manish, why don't you give us your thoughts on cities and economic development?
Thank you so much. Talking about the context of India, we always believed that India lives in villages, but there is an increasing realization that's changing. It's changing very, very rapidly. 1/3 of India today is urban, which is far more than the population of India that was in 1947 when we became independent. So it's a very vast change that is occurring. In about a decade's time, we would be 50% urban and 50% rural. So that's another significant change that is coming to us. 62% of our GDP is from cities, even at this point of time. World Bank reports indicate that the growth of India is being powered by cities, and that's inevitable to happen. And therefore, for us, the importance of planning that while a vast number of our people still live in rural area, how do you ensure that a managed migration can occur, or a style of life which ensures that cities continue to work as drivers of growth. So that's the way we have to function. One of the important things which I guess as NSDC we do is picking up this signal, particularly the market signals, and responding through a public-private partnership. What are the skill needs of a city or a town as it goes about growing, and how you integrate that with rural area. And some interesting things occur. For example, I'll give one example of the city of Bhubaneswar, which is in Odisha, and rural girls from Odisha coming and working there, and what they work on is basically enabling driverless cars in California. So it's a very strange mix of jobs which are emerging, and the basic training which was provided to them was through our training providers, which are all public-private partnerships. We also have similar examples of cities like Delhi, where the police force, becoming cognizant that crime will actually reduce economic growth, decided that they will use skills as an instrument to train young delinquents and get them into workforce, and it's worked quite well. The police in several other cities are now keen to adopt the same program. So I can see quite a bit of synergy coming out from skills and cities as they grow. Maybe I'll add more as we go along. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Manish, for that. I mean, that's an interesting challenge, isn't it? I mean, the pace of change, urbanization from a rural economy and how you manage that. And we should come back to that, because I can imagine that that is one of the biggest challenges that lots of cities and lots of countries around the world are facing. But why don't we turn now to get an education provider perspective? So Emma, from the UK, I mean, how do you see this debate around economic development in cities?
Thank you. Well, as the Minister outlined, in the United Kingdom, skills are absolutely integral to the future development of our economy. And colleges, which are the sector that I represent at the Association of Colleges, have a really pivotal role to play in the development of the workforce for the future. So in colleges in England, we have 2.2 million students studying with us, and the average college works with 600 businesses, trains 1,200 apprentices. So colleges really have to set the right curriculum provision for their learners and to meet the needs of the regional economy. So to give you an example, there'd be no point in a college, let's say, offering a very high level of hospitality training and hospitality programs if there's not the demand in the local region for the students to progress into jobs afterwards. So colleges, training providers, universities have a really important role to play in matching their curriculum and the expertise of their staff to what the needs of the local and then the national economy are.
And that is quite a challenge, I would say, generally, in terms of that matching up of supply and demand, layered with economic geography, and thinking about, as the Minister said as well from a UK perspective, industrial policy. So looking at how I think it's a complex policy challenge in bringing all of those together. But I think often what does get lost in this debate is young people themselves, because this is about their futures, which is why here at the WorldSkills Conference, at the WorldSkills competition, where you've got so many young people competing to be the best in the world from countries across the world, we must never lose sight that the purpose of these debates is to make sure that we are creating economies that are fit for the future, and that young people are getting the opportunities they need to thrive. And so that's why I'm pleased on the panel we have Rachel to give us her perspective on that.
So from a young person's point of view, I would say that one of the main things that our policymakers could help with to improve the TVET sector is to make it a first choice in education, instead of because you can't get into university, then you go into TVET. The other thing is to identify the skills gap and also to link with educators and employers in the industry, and through that providing apprenticeships and internships, because the education will prepare the students to be ready for the opportunities that the employers can provide. Lastly, I also think that policymakers must support innovation, creativity, and provide opportunities.
Thank you very much, Rachel. I should have said at the beginning of the session that we are encouraging you to think of questions and to ask questions of the panel. And I'll be throwing that open to the floor. So if there's anything that you've heard, please do indicate that you'd like to ask a question, and we will come to you hopefully with a microphone to be able to do that. So please, question already? There we go, fantastic. Are we able to get a microphone to the lady? You can just let us know who you are and where you're from.
Hello? Oh, okay. Hi, my name's Kelly Betts, and I'm from Canada. And I'm a huge supporter of skills and WorldSkills and Skills Canada and Skills British Columbia. And I have a question. I really liked what you had to say about making skills and the development of skills and vocational training a number one choice, not an alternative, not a second choice, not a third choice, but a first choice. So the question for the panel is, how do you go about doing that? making skills a first choice?
Fantastic questions. So, Rachel, why don't you kick off? I mean, you were raising that question. I mean, from your perspective and the generation of competitors that you worked with, I mean, what do you think policymakers should be doing, government should be doing, to really make this the first destination, the first choice among young people?
So I would say what is really important is to give young people the options, to let them know what's available to them, because a lot of times people think that the skills are not as glamorous or not as well recognized. But what we know from WorldSkills competitions is that we train, like the colleges train the best, and we send them to compete on a world stage. And that actually shows that skills are very important in driving the economy, and people do believe in that. So if we can give young people the choices instead of just what the country is always, where I was from, we always think that university is the only option. And so if we can, like what's happening in Abu Dhabi here, when the young people come and try a skill, they can see the different options that are available to them, and I think that will help them to make an informed decision. And as like parents and educators, then support their decisions.
Thank you. And again, that goes to the heart of careers advice and making this a prestigious route. I mean, from a colleges or training provider perspective, what do you think their role should be in really, I think, increasing the volume in terms of, I mean, turning up the volume in terms of making and helping parents and young people understand that these are valuable career routes?
I think what you said about the careers guidance is absolutely spot on, and I do think we have an issue in every country with the prestige and the profile of technical education. And I think colleges have a role to play in raising the profile, I think by getting more information out there, working with their local schools, particularly to start targeting younger people before they progress to college, to show them what the options are if they take a technical or college vocational route, and giving them case studies and saying, for example, in the oil and gas industry in the UK, apprentices who go to college, they do a higher national diploma qualification, not a degree, they then start working in the oil and gas industry with a place provided, and their average starting salary is higher than that of the average university degree graduate. And it isn't just about the money, but I think we need to say here, there are really positive examples of students coming through a college education, getting a vocational qualification and going on to work. And I'm really pleased that in England we're starting to introduce the new T-level route that the Minister referred to earlier, which sits parallel with the A-level route. Now, A-level doesn't necessarily mean academic, but you could balance academic and technical level, but they're actually on a par, and I think that's a really positive way to see government policy showing the value of technical and skills education.
Okay, and then Manish, from an Indian perspective, I mean, thinking about policy and thinking about what you were describing in terms of economic developments, is this the same sort of challenge about helping, identifying skills gaps and then helping young people, parents, careers advisors really think about encouraging more young people down these career routes?
That's right. I think the challenge in India is also relating to social norms when it comes to vocational trainings, and a belief system that probably the vocational training is inferior to a regular kind of education. And I think that's very unfortunate. However, issues that relates to social norms take a bit longer time than other issues, but there has to be a persistent effort towards it. In fact, personally, I feel that WorldSkills Competition is one such platform which helps shift mindset. If let's say vocational training is not considered cool in the past, it's possible to make it look cool in the future. But how do you go about that whole process? You have to think through that. In fact, in India, we have several other programs at this point of time, which includes the Clean India program, this sanitation program, which is also based on behavioral change. And I personally believe that behavioral science has a huge role to play when it comes to thinking about how you approach this whole issue of vocational training. going forward. And we need to perhaps get more of that expertise into this thinking process and help us build in that direction. Operationally, when we look at it, I think we look at two things. One is we use technology to make people feel that you are going through a layer of technology which is superior to perhaps the technology that even a regular educated Indian doesn't go through. So that gives him a feeling of, upsort, that you are something which is incrementally higher. And then I think secondly, we are also opportunistic. So for example, lots of engineering colleges in India are closing down because nobody wants engineers. But surprisingly, people actually want a large number of skilled masses. And therefore we are converting them into skill training universities. We are calling them university because that brings that added glamour which is perhaps necessary. So we're just being opportunistic about it, but the social change, the change in norms are going to take a bit of time.
So your challenge to us is to be cool, and to be cooler, and to make these career options cool. But also, I think what you're raising is another important dynamic, which is around social inclusion, because we know that in cities in particular, there are huge numbers of young people on low skills who need to be skilled up. And this came up, I think, in the minister's speech around social inclusion, thinking about ethnic minorities in different cities. I mean, what do you think about how we can make skills strategies as inclusive as possible, given that we know that diversity drives productivity and that diversity can encapsulate, enhance and power making change happen? Emma, what are your thoughts on that?
I think that in order to generate better inclusion in colleges and education around the world, I think we need to make sure that colleges are safe spaces for students to study in, and that they have the right facilities, the right tutors, the right expertise to welcome students from different backgrounds. If you look at colleges in the UK, I mentioned a figure earlier of 2.2 million students. There are 1.4 million of those who are adults who are coming back to college, perhaps for retraining. So the age mix is really great in the UK in terms of the students who study with us. So I think we've got to make sure that we continue to look at what students need and be flexible as well, particularly looking at online learning, part-time delivery as well, to ensure that we can bring in the greatest number of students as possible into the training providers.
Okay. And Manish? Same sort of question around inclusion and diversity.
Yeah, I think there is a need to become very focused on certain categories. And for example, we work on persons with disability in a big way because we realize that they require, for getting into economic workforce, they require a different level of training. And we work considerably on that. So I guess inclusion is definitely going to be an important issue as we go forward.
And Rachel, any thoughts on how to improve, particularly in cities where we do have diverse populations, how do we engage more young people in these career routes?
I think giving people the opportunity to change their career paths in future, like, for example, if you're trained as or if you're trained in business and somehow you realize that you want to be a nurse. Like in Singapore, they have good programs such as professional conversion programs that allow people to swap out and try another trade and eventually, be good at it and attain excellence.
So it's the flexible approach to as Emma was saying as well. Are there any other questions from the audience? Yeah, it's a question, I can see a baseball hat with an M on it. Do you want to stand up? Is there a mic coming? Yep, here we go.
My name is Tami Black, I'm from South Africa. One or two questions. The narrative here tells us that we are contradicting what you regard as cognitive knowledge. That knowledge is not only in the realm of cognitive, hence cognitive dissonance. Emphasis on skills. But I'm intrigued by the Indian example, particularly in relation to training of prisoners. I would want to hear more as to how do you really conceptualize a situation where people who are imprisoned are empowered with such amount of skills that you have alluded to. But secondly, what is your take, particularly of the various countries in relation to what is called recognition of prior learning, where there are people who have acquired certain skills, but because they've not been exposed to a certain form of formal education, they are unable to utilize those skills and to be of better service to the various realms and fields of knowledge because of the lack of benefit of formal education. Thank you very much.
Thank you. So particularly around, from an Indian perspective, empowering people to take up skills. And then the second part of the question, I think, is around formal and informal education routes. How do we make sure that people who are being informally trained, their skills are recognized? So Manish, why don't you pick that up?
So the first one is about empowering using skills. And I think what you wanted to know was essentially about how we go about that process. So I guess a few things which really makes a change in my view when we do skilling. One is the ability of the person to get into the job market. Economic empowerment is definitely an empowerment that leads him to feel better about himself and therefore a better place for him in the society. Secondly, what we have also witnessed is a formal certification, a recognition, an assessment that is held at the end of his training, and formal certification that also empowers him, because there are many who might go through or might have actually abilities but do not have a certificate and therefore do not have a say in the job market. I think what really happens when they have that certificate in their hand is the change in the bargaining power, because I have noticed that a person may be in a job which he might have been informally doing before, but having got himself trained a little more with a short-term training course, with that certificate in hand, the bargaining power that he has with a potential employer actually goes up. So that's an empowerment, definitely. On the recognition of prior learning, that's a huge program we have. We have almost $2 billion worth of program running at this point of time, which is grant-based. Another $500 million which is loan-based. In that 2 billion, almost 40% of it is devoted to recognition of prior learning. So to give an example, there is a famous carpet industry in India, a company in India called the Jaipur Rugs, and they manufacture a lot of carpets which is sold across the globe. People who make that carpet are usually women who live in remote parts of India, and they never really had a recognition before of their skills. This is the first time that the company itself has taken the initiative to conduct recognition of prior learning with our help, and they are trained, they are assessed, and they are certified, which really empowers them. The sense of pride that comes to them, recognizing that the work that they have been doing is being valued, that is really, really big. So that's in the Indian context, both of it is underway. Given the scale at which we operate, we can always say that quality can always be improved. I know that's our constant struggle, but I think the direction is the same as you said. Thanks.
Thank you. And Emma, does that resonate with the UK experience in terms of particularly people who may have informal training and are looking to get into a formal education system where colleges may be picking up, for example, people that may not have had the opportunities earlier in life? And from a city's perspective, that gap, that's a huge opportunity, I think, in terms of upskilling people to be part of an economic growth agenda. Is that an experience that UK colleges face?
Yeah, absolutely. I think colleges, we're fortunate in the UK that our system's quite flexible and that we can bring in people at lots of different levels, including access levels, quite basic entry levels, and then put people through a suite of progressive qualifications in order to get them to the right level for the job that they're targeting. So absolutely, I think having a flexible system with different entry points, and particularly a system that allows not only school leavers but adult returners or people who want to retrain to come into a college of vocational education is absolutely key, because the demands of the labour force, businesses, industrial priorities do change, and I think we need to make sure that our skills education system is flexible enough to accommodate that.
And back to just picking up, Manish, on the point you were making about rural skills in particular, and the challenge between rural and urban as we're seeing more urbanization. I mean, what do you think in policy terms can be done to make sure that, you know, economic entities as cities are driving productivity, growth, exports, innovation, all the positive things that policymakers and governments want to see? But how do you make sure that is balanced with rural economy needs? Because that is still going to exist, and we will still need, for example, agriculture for our own food supplies and all the benefits of rural economies. How, from a policy perspective, do we get the skills balance right to make sure that we are upskilling people in those rural economies while we are driving urbanization as well?
I think this is a very important point to address, simply because if you ignore this particular aspect of skilling, it lead to difficulties for the government that in a way endangers the overall skill agenda itself. So therefore, a focus on agriculture is quite important, and the fact that overall the number of people working in agriculture is declining in India, yet in absolute numbers they are quite huge. So quite a lot of our attention is also going towards agriculture. We have a whole sector skill council which is based on agriculture, and they focus on job roles related to agriculture and how transitions could be made possible from agriculture to others. So for example, from experience, we have realized that it's easy to transition from agriculture to textiles. So therefore, that's a pathway which we have realized it works in the field. Secondly, also we realize that there are new opportunities that are emerging, which is driving younger generation to cities and towns from agriculture. So for example, Ola and Uber, when they had come to India, and they're expanding very rapidly, you'll find Uber drivers actually coming from many of the rural India. And now the challenge is that when they come to urban India, the biggest challenge they face is about accommodation, the logistics, the fact that where do you live and where do you eat, because it can be quite expensive compared to your rural background. So we are trying to see how we can make their life easier by getting our act together through the Logistics Sector Skill Council, which is a separate sector skill council we have. So I guess it's a question of balancing both sides, urban and rural, not keeping your eye off the rural, given the fact that urbans are your driving center, because typically if you don't do that, then the rural can actually stop the urban if they wanted to in a typical democracy, because they can vote out the government. So it becomes extremely important to keep an eye on the large numbers that is there in rural.
Thank you. And Rachel from Manish has just been talking about young people being attracted to big cities and wanting to make their careers there. Is that still, do you think, a major pull for urbanization? Therefore, it's a positive thing that young people want to do that? Or are there things that we should be thinking about for young people who may not want to go and work in a city, that we should be empowering them to stay in the rural economy?
So I think that the students in the rural areas should be given opportunity, and we would hope that it would eventually work towards an equal opportunity as what the students in the urban areas would get. However, keeping in mind that people might choose to stay in the rural communities. So giving them the education, the opportunity, and the option would then empower them in that way. And I mean, in the next 10, 20, 30 years, maybe the rural areas would become more urban, and that will help with the change, and it will also help to, close the skill gap and the income gap.
Indeed. Back to choices again. And finally, Emma, from a UK perspective, there's been a lot of focus, and the Minister mentioned it, industrial policy and looking at the growth of cities and devolution of skills agendas. From an education provider perspective, I know there are agricultural colleges as well. To what extent is the balance right, do you think, in the debate?
Well, there are 14 land-based specialist colleges in England, and then a number of other specialist colleges around high-speed rail and other dedicated industries. I think it's not just maybe about the number of institutions, it's about how they deliver and how they reach the communities. So again, there are some examples of colleges, Cornwall College, for example, which teaches in many, many different sites. I think colleges have to look at their geographical area or other training providers and think about how they can get to the right people to deliver them. their training course. And again, it may be looking at online learning, travelling tutors. You know, there's some models in the UK, the University of the Highlands and Islands in northern Scotland, which teaches on really quite remote islands, but they have an infrastructure that everything is online for their delivery. So it's trying to look at these kind of alternative models to reach students and trainees in parts of countries that are quite difficult to reach and are away from the urban centres, because those people are entitled to an education just as much as the students in the cities.
Indeed, thank you. Now, my skill challenge was to get us out of here at 12:30 on time for lunch, and the clock has just gone 0. So thank you all for your participation and engagement this morning. Please thank me in joining our panel and thanking our panel, and hopefully you find the session short but sweet and insightful. Thank you very much.
Neil, that was a terrific panel. And of course, we started with a wonderful invitation from your Minister for Skills saying, our cities are your cities. So do take up that invitation to come to London, Manchester, Leeds, Birmingham, whatever, to try to share best skills and practices. What was really good in your session was the emphasis on inclusion. You know, Anish, you mentioned social inclusion, from Emma talking about inclusion of different age groups, a reminder that the university should be safe spaces because people are coming back for more training. Don't forget that 6 jobs are going to be the norm in our lifetime. And of course, most of all for you, Rachel, inclusion of the youth, what matters most of all. Give us choices and give us chances. I think you've left us with some really good ideas.